So, tools. I remember when a decade ago I bought my apartment and my father was helping me move in. And later on, when we were done, he took me to a hardware store where he bought me this toolbox and this hammer. And he said to me, "This one you will need for sure, and you'll fill it with the rest of the tools as you need them." And it has proven quite true, both in case of my home toolbox and the production toolbox of 11-bit Studios that I've joined in November 2015. It was almost exactly a year after This War of Mine has been released. And 2 months before This War of Mine, the little ones came out on consoles. And really a lot has happened in this time between 2015 and 2018 at 11-bit Studios. We've not only remained an independent company, but This War of Mine's success has given us financial comfort to tackle much more ambitious and complex projects. But of course it came at a cost. 11-bit Studios had fans now, and there were millions of them, and they were expecting us to deliver another meaningful, mature game. In the meantime, the company grew quite rapidly. At the end of 2015, the dev team had 27 people. Frostpunk has just delivered the first playable prototype, focusing on survival city building. There was almost no society in it at all. You can see there's no roads, and the buildings, all the structures, are constructed on the square grid. And this is how we worked in the old office. 6 months later, dev team grew to 35 people. We hired our first lady developer, and we were trying to introduce the society into the game. This War of Mine team was working on the anniversary edition content. Near the end of 2016, we grew to 42 people. We had Project 8 that's just started forming, and Frostpunk finally delivered the new internal demo with a new renderer, a radial city with streets, and the first version of the society with, call to actions that are present to this day. And This War of Mine team was regrouping before the next big thing, which was the Father's Promise and this War of Mine stories series. In the next 6 months, we hired another 11 people. We reached 53 in the whole dev team. And Frostpunk was doubling its effort before 2 big reveals. First was the hands-off demo on the E3, and the second one was a hands-on demo on Gamescom. And the society has finally taken shape. And on the side of This War of Mine, Father's Promise was right around the corner. And this is how the team grew, if you want to look at the faces. On launch day of Frostpunk, its core team was 48 people. The whole dev team of 11-bit Studios grew to 65. But the dev team was not the only one growing. When Frostpunk started, we had... this is the launch day party. Almost the whole company. On launch day, when Frostpunk started, we had no IT, no HR, and a producer whose role was very undefined. When I wasn't busy with the projects themselves, I was upgrading people's hardware. I was recruiting new team members and screwing together desks and figuring out how to fit more people in this small office where we didn't really have space for new recruits. But over time, the role got redefined. I no longer had to set up sales because finally, sales guys and biz dev guys started to do that. We hired an IT guy, which meant that we were finally able to focus on fixing bugs, not the computers. And we hired HR, which meant that my role in recruitment was now handled by dedicated people. And we moved to a new, bigger office, which meant that the office space stopped being such an issue. And I still had to take care of upkeeping This War of Mine and Anomaly series, but I finally had time to really focus on Frostpunk. And in the meantime, we finally hired an assistant producer to help out with 2 active projects and over 50 people in dev team. And oh boy, Frostpunk was a tough project. You know, looking back at this war of mine, it was quite straightforward. It was a survival scavenging game with shelter upgrade mechanics and a third dose of meaningful choices in a war setting. But Frostpunk was just truly iterative to the very end. And design-wise, it was a survival game meets city building, meets meaningful choices, meets society. And it really, really didn't want to go well together. We spent a lot of time balancing survival versus city building. If the game got too tough, we were losing the fun. It was just sacked out of the city building. But if the city building became too fun, we were losing the survival component. So another problem was that to have the society, we didn't really have many references. In city builders, people are often either a resource or some kind of a pie chart of factions that are supposed to be there in the game. What we wanted to have was a believable society. And trust me, it took a lot of iterations and well over a year to get to the stage where we actually felt the society in the game. It also took a good number of tries to make sure that player feels enough agency over what he's doing, that the game feels active, not reactive. And while this war of mine was divided clearly into levels, Frostpunk was effectively a one-scene game. So we were working for years on this one level. It wasn't just hard to track production-wise. The bigger problem is that it makes it harder for the whole team to actually feel where they are in the development because they've been seeing the same level over and over for a very long period of time. And with just one scene, the systems and mechanics were much more interconnected than in the case of this war of mine. That meant just one flaw in the AI system could effectively derail both the game's economy and the society, which in turn meant blocking most of the designers who were unable to do their job. Also, huge chunks of design, like society and endgame, were in constant iteration. We knew when the iteration was going to end, but we never knew if it will be any good. So it was because we had to invent a lot of stuff from scratch without real references. And because of the interconnectivity and iterative process, we had problems hitting the classic milestones. Our first real vertical slice was the Gamescom demo that was released way less than a year before the final launch of the game. And we never hit a classic alpha or beta stage. We pretty much went from vertical slice to gold in 8 months. And we also had a rapidly growing team with a lot of junior members that were growing together with the project. That meant they never finished a project before, they were not familiar with production methodologies of game dev. And on the other hand, we had experienced members from other teams, other projects that were used to, handling things differently. And just as the whole design process and development process of Frostpunk was iterative, so was the production process. And it iterated in pretty much all the important production areas. I thought I'll just use, at first I wanted to use puzzles or 4 elements, but 4 horsemen work way better for me. So these areas are team structure, planning, tracking, and communication. And a lot of the end results of these evolutions that you will see seem like a no-brainer, like they should be obvious. We should have started with that. And I agree to a degree. But we needed the team to grow together with these, with the way we were doing things. Let's start with the team structure. At the very beginning, the structure of our development team in Frostpunk had 3 independent departments with 3 cooperating leads. And since 11-bit studios are very design-driven, often design was acting as a client of art and code. But of course, each department also had its own set of internal deliverables. And after the first prototype, we decided that we'd rather set up interdisciplinary teams dedicated to key topics. And we've defined these topics as city and society. And each team had an assigned lead and fixed members and a set of goals. Problems with this approach showed up very quickly as new key topics started to emerge and people started migrating in and out of teams. And the first big hole that we've noticed here was that the artists didn't necessarily have to be inside of the teams. Most of the time, most of the artists were acting more as internal outsourcers for the design teams rather than integral part of the teams. And the structure and solution we finally ended up with was kind of a hybrid solution. We had owners of key topics. By the way, this is not the whole structure, it's just an example. We had owners of key topics that were responsible for delivering on those within milestones, and they could use resources like programmers, designers, other designers, and artists, and those were assigned to them by me and the leads based on the topic's priority, on the team members' availability, or workload, you name it. And of course, there were also most of those owners were designers, but some topics were also quite, code-centric or art-centric. And this, of course, meant that some of the topics will be delayed because they will have to wait for resources from other topics to be completed first. And some of the teams remained independent, like the AI team that was 3 guys that were working together throughout the whole, almost the whole development. So moving on to planning. Please don't try to read that. It's just a screenshot of one of our scope documents. There's nothing that interesting there. But the milestone document in the form that you're seeing was one thing that we did really well and really poorly from the start. A milestone scope document contained all the key topics, all the goals of the milestone, divided into must-haves, should-haves, and nice-to-haves. And it had rough estimates consulted with topic owners, and it even noticed the big dependencies, mostly by just noticing the workload of key members. What it drastically underestimated, however, was time we needed for iterations, for sprint planning, and for reviews. Very often, this scope only took into account 1 or 2 iterations, where we had no idea how many of those iterations there will be. We also did sprints, but since we didn't have much buffer, and the sprints got often derailed by, well, for example, technological debt or growing numbers of bugs, it was apparent that having a demo, a classic version of sprints tells you that at the end of every sprint you should have demo. We knew right from the start it's not going to be possible, so we opted for demo every second sprint. But then one thing happened. To review a demo, you need time. So our directors were reviewing the demo while we were already in the next sprint that we couldn't effectively plan because we didn't have the review, so we didn't know what we need to fix. So when the review came somewhere in the middle of the sprint, we had this third sprint completely unplanned, and we were almost at the end of it. So every few sprints, one of those was completely unplanned. And then, because of the delay in receiving the feedback and implementing those things from feedback, another demo wasn't at the end of fourth or fifth sprint. It was delayed even further. So after, I think, 9 months of such development, we sat down with leads and devised a huge plan to how to revamp the production process. And we were quite happy with what we came up with. We defined 3 types of sprints. First was the review sprint. It was supposed to be more or less a week-long sprint where exactly that happened. The board of directors plays the demo, gives us a review. The leads plan the next sprint, and the rest of the team has time for small refactors or R&D of future topics or just, plain old bug fixing. The dev sprint was supposed to be a very straightforward 2 or 3 weeks sprint in which we are just executing the plan that we've made before. And the third one is a wild chaos sprint. The term itself was coined by Michał Drozdowski, our design director, because he was asked once by the journalist how our games are made, and he replied with, well, it's kind of a wild chaos. So we used the wild chaos name for the last sprint, a sprint that was supposed to be used at the end of every milestone. No more than 3 weeks of short iterations to close the remaining topics, to stabilize the demo, and have it ready for tests. And we assumed that the milestones that we will be given fixed dates for the milestones. So how it was supposed to work is that we get a date of the milestone, like we have 2.5 months to deliver it. And then we use those to mix and match how we want to tackle it. Do we want to use 2 dev sprints in a row, then get a review sprint just to check what's going on, and then repeat that and slap a wild chaos at the end of it? Or do we want to do it some completely other way, like dev sprint, review sprint, dev sprint, review sprint? Whatever was supposed to work. But this was never implemented, though. We did use some elements of it, but after we've completed this idea, we were given an internal delivery date of the whole game, and we realized that having some a kind of a revolution in the way we are planning things is not going to help us deliver it on time. So instead of a revolution, we just evolved a little bit. So we thought, if the sprints as we have them are not working, let's just get rid of them altogether. So this way, instead of people adding bugs and tasks to the current sprint, which effectively meant that pretty much in every sprint we had, we started and ended with the same number of open issues. We just all added to this one current development pool. But of course, you have to somehow remedy the task overflow. And that's how we introduced a triage. A triage was a meeting every day of all the leads where we read through every single issue that was reported in the last 24 hours. And we were assigning the correct people to those tasks. We assigned the priorities, and we very often threw these away because we knew the tasks won't fit in the schedule. And this, in the end, turned out to be very intuitive for the whole development team. And I think it was pretty much the best way to finish the project on time. And there is one very important lesson in the middle of this presentation that I would like you all to take from our struggles with planning. If the quality cannot be compromised and the design is still in shambles, you can't even pretend you can plan your milestones correctly. I mean, I know it seems like very counterintuitive, like against the very core of what the producer should do. But when facing a core feature that just cannot be done wrong, and you have no idea how much time it will take, you can try to time box or plan its current iteration, of course, but you have no way of knowing how many iterations there will be. So you cannot plan or time box the whole feature. What you can do instead of trying to push all the designers to, just finish it on time, whatever that means, is focus on planning all the rest of the work around this feature so that all the rest of the game can progress in as smooth of a way as possible, and you have to also clearly communicate to all the stakeholders the risk involved in this kind of development. Let's move on to tracking. Back in the days of This War of Mine, everything was tracked using Mantis. We had 7 priority levels and 7 severity levels, which effectively gave us 49 levels of priority. And those were shifting a lot during the development. But it worked for a small team. A supplement method was whole sheets of paper bestowed upon the dev team by the design director and art director. And these tasks were the supplementary tasks to those that were on Mantis. Unfortunately, most of those never made it to Mantis, so it was, kind of a wild chaos. But this is how we finished, well, the guys before me finished This War of Mine. And Frostpunk's tracking started on Trello, which was quite sufficient for a small pre-production team, but at the end of the first prototype, it became very apparent that the team is growing out of it. So we've moved to Jira. And Jira, with its robust number of issue types, has given us the way to differentiate between them. So we've introduced epics that were supposed to be the way of grouping the tasks together. And sometimes it really worked well, and we were able to make an epic of a feature that was delivered during the milestone, like radial streets. But unfortunately, more often, epics were used as big bags of labels for issues and tasks that were vaguely connected to each other, like society or exploration. These epics were unclosable in any time before the launch date. But it turned out that after we laid off a little bit and stopped as leads trying to assign epics from up to down, then people started taking initiative and setting up epics for smaller features that were actually manageable and were way less rigid and useful for the actual development. What Jira finally allowed us to do is, of course we did that before, but Jira at least let us easily differentiate between tasks and bugs visually compared to Trello or Mantis. And that was very intuitive, and everyone loved that. What was also quite intuitive, we introduced a subtype of bug called crash, and we just assigned the highest priority to it always, because it was obviously a development blocker. What wasn't so intuitive, however, was introducing themes or stories. Those were supposed to be a little bit bigger tasks that will involve few people rather than one, and tasks were supposed to be pretty much subtasks of themes in many cases, but that was very unintuitive and nobody really understood the difference, so everybody just used tasks, and after a few months we just decided that themes are not working, and we tossed them all together, tossed them out. And yeah, since many tasks are way more easily manageable in form of a production list, we didn't actually force everyone to use Jira. Because assets like buildings or 2D illustrations for the call to action pop-ups were just much easier tracked on a big spreadsheet. And that's what we started to do. But this, of course, generated a lot of side documents that were indeed very easy to use compared to Jira, but also very hard to update and keep track of. So whenever we could, we tried to do something about it. That's how two tracking tools, custom tracking tools, were created. First was the Buildings Jira Kanban board. It was the first time we used a standard Kanban board in Jira. So in order to do that, we had to take the whole art team that was responsible for assets like buildings and resources, and take them out of sprints and just let them produce the assets continually. But also we had to hack the Jira Kanban board a little bit, because we wanted to see the status of these buildings. So instead of adding two more columns to every column to have the concept art in progress, done, and in review, we used the assignees. So every time my face showed up on the board, it meant that, for example, the concept art is still to do. And if an artist took it, he assigned it to himself, and it made it's in progress. And whenever Łukasz's, the art lead's face came up, it meant that he has to review this stage. And when it was done, the issue was just moved to the right with my face on it again, until it was all done. And it's not exactly how the Jira Kanban board was designed to be used, but it worked for us, so well. And another problematic area was illustrations, or the CTA, the pop-ups that show up in-game when society wants something. And these were very frequently rewritten and redesigned. It was the most fluctuating part of the assets. And with hundreds of CTAs, where the whole story arcs were being scrapped, added, and rewritten, we quickly found out that having a spreadsheet with, I don't know, 200 of those, and updating it every time makes for almost a full-time job. So instead of that, it took a few hours of a programmer's time to add prefixes and suffixes to the names of configs of these call to actions. And this way, we were tracking those not in the spreadsheet, but directly in the engine. We even could generate reports aggregating how many of those were still to do, or in the past one, or in debug mode, so they didn't count. Moving on to the communication. For the first few years, 11-bits were just using Skype for their text communication. And unfortunately, with every added member, the inconvenience of adding everyone manually was just growing worse and worse. And in the middle of Frostpunk's development, we decided to switch to Atlassian's solution, HipChat, because we already used Jira. And it automatically added every employee to the contact list, which was very convenient. And it was easy to set up rooms. It also supposedly could be synchronized with Jira, and we were very excited about that issue, so we decided to never use it. And I think like 9 months later, we switched to Slack, mostly for user experience issues. It wasn't anything big, but a bunch of small UX issues just led us to Slack that was much more convenient for everyone, and that's what we're sticking with today. But those are just easy tools for communication. The tool that was supposed to most benefit our communication was Standups. For the first Standups, we've gathered in conference room and sat down. And the funny thing is that we knew exactly why stand-ups are called stand-ups and why that what we are doing is wrong. But with the current company culture, we felt that it will feel forced to introduce the stand-ups properly. So we just did it wrong. And we also did stand-ups with sub-teams that I've already mentioned before, so CT and society and later on art. And all these stand-ups were conducted in a row. So the last one was often delayed if the previous ones took longer. And everyone took turn to speak, even if they didn't really have much to say. And all the leads were present on all 3 stand-ups, which meant that we were losing an hour of leads time every day. And within the first month, people shifted between teams and still attended the original stand-ups. So it quickly became a mess, and for a while we even resigned from using this tool altogether. We were trying to revive it by introducing, revised teams or using smaller teams, but in a more decentralized way, but these didn't really give us good results. So finally, we've evolved into our final way of doing stand-ups. So we gathered in the corridor in the middle of the development section of our office, and everyone had just a few steps to there. Only owners of current topics and the leads were mandatory on the stand-ups, but everyone else, if they wanted, could attend. And I was the one pointing at people, the key people that were working on key features at the moment, to ask them what's the status. So this way, not everyone had to talk, and meetings were kept to very minimum. And at the end, QA had the floor to make sure that they are testing the right thing, not some feature that's still in progress. And the way I think that what shows the best how well it worked is that over time, more and more people were attending those stand-ups. They wanted to attend themselves because they wanted to know what's going on. They wanted to hear the new announcement from the leads. They wanted to hear what's going on in the topics. And the last major communication tool that we've introduced was retrospectives. And to be completely honest, during the development of Frostpunk, we've only had 3. One after the second prototype, which took us a whole day because we did it with the whole company, but it was very useful to clear the air after a long and problematic milestone. And we did 2 more, one after introducing the exploration and one after the AI refactor. And the retrospectives were small-scale postmortems used to identify problems and sum up production processes, pros and cons. And the way how we did it is, everyone involved in a topic was invited. So if someone was a member of the exploration implementation team, at least for a while, he was invited. We had a lot of post-its and pens, and everyone took 2 minutes, and 2 minutes only, to write down as many positive things that they remembered about the process. After those 2 minutes, the post-its were pasted on the wall, aggregated when there were doubles or very similar issues. And then everyone had 3 votes to vote for the issues that were on the wall. This is how we voted for 3 most important issues that we talked about. We didn't talk about any other that were on the wall. And then we did that, and then we discussed what was so cool about those things, how we can implement them in more cases. And then we repeated the same process for the negative things. And that's how we selected 3 things that we had to work on, that we had to eliminate and deal with. At the end of such meeting, we had 3 things we were happy with, 3 that we had to work on, and we also had people assigned to all those things that were responsible for doing something about those issues. And the retrospectives were also a great tool for simply just, shouting at each other if there were any conflicts. And we should definitely have put aside a little bit more time for the retrospectives. And the really cool thing is that after we all took a little bit of a break after the development of Frostpunk, we came back to the office, and the first thing that popped up was retrospectives, exactly in the model that I've just described. So people felt the need for that. And with these tools, how they evolved to that state, in communication, in planning, in team structure, and in tracking, we launched the game. And the takeaway I would like you to have after this presentation, there's just a bunch of things I would like you as producers and as developers to think about. First, please don't let anyone tell you that a tool in your toolbox is a must-have. My father bought me this hammer. I never used it. I used a different one with the rubber head. At 11 bits, we lost a lot of time trying to use sprints when we could have just not used this tool. Second thing, don't be afraid of weird stuff in your toolbox. At home, these are all the heel tips for my wife's shoes. And because that's what I have in my toolbox. It's not in every man's toolbox. And also, not many studios keep track of their assets directly in the engine. But the point is, if you need it and it works, just keep it in your toolbox. And the third thing is there are certainly bad ways of, incorrect ways of using a tool. But if an unorthodox way works for you, then it cannot be completely wrong. This is a WZ98, a Polish battle knife designed in the 90s. It was, of course, designed for killing people. But here's my WZ98. The oxidation went off after I peeled oranges with it. I screw the screws with the tip, and I use the handle as a hammer. And similarly, we didn't have to use, we didn't use Jira's Kanban board the way it was designed, but it still worked like a charm. So who cares if it wasn't designed to be used that way? Thank you. Questions? I think you have to step up to the microphone or something.
Basically, I believe you mentioned that some of the key features could not be time-boxed because you had to reach certain level of quality. Mm-hmm. So what actually was your benchmark throughout the production, and weren't you afraid of getting caught in some sort of a timeless
infinite
iteration loop? Yeah.
We didn't have a benchmark because there wasn't any on the market.
Right.
We just needed to feel that it works. That because for a long time, in case of society in Frostpunk, for example, we felt that certain elements of it, or Marta and Kuba actually talked about it at 11 a.m. today. We felt that a lot of things are working, but there are also a lot of things that are not intuitive and really weird about the society. We had versions of our society that were extremely demanding, and you felt like you're doing the best you can, and they're just being ignorant dicks, demanding more and more. And it was very easy to just shift towards these weird areas where the system just works on paper, but as soon as you start playing it, it just comes up with a lot of different small problems. And of course, yes, there is a risk for an infinite loop, and I have no idea what would have happened if we took, I don't know, 2 years and we saw that this society is still not working completely. Maybe we would have scrapped the game. I don't know, but what we knew was that it's a core feature of the game. What we want to sell in this game, what we want to make this game work. So we couldn't compromise this core feature. We could time box. In the meantime, we were time boxing a lot of other things, like the economy of our game wasn't at the very center of Frostpunk. So we could compromise there a little bit. Use a little bit less complex, mechanics, or not have 7 types of coal mines, but just 3, for example. And that's where we could time box to let ourselves have more time to work on the society.
Right. Thanks. Just a follow-up question: was the assessment actually internal, or did you have focus tests throughout the the 8-month period you mentioned, from the vertical slice to the gold?
We had a lot of focus tests. Right. We did internal assessments, of course, but after a while we felt that we need a lot of testers to confirm if the game is doing what we want it to do to their minds, basically. So we had rounds of focus tests at the end every few weeks, really.
Right. Thank you. May I have another one, or?
Yes, just one.
Okay. So you did mention that you've had those daily reviews with the leads on every issue report in the last 24 hours. So at our company, I work at Creative Forge Games. Every single member of the team is encouraged and allowed to report improvement issues, for example.
Yeah, of course.
Do you also have this system, or were you forced to limit the feedback of, for example, junior members at some point, because going through all the the stuff every day could take too much time?
We took around an hour or an hour and a half to do that every day. Sometimes there were days that were more rich in issues, but on average it was like between 70 and 100 issues that we went through.
Right.
A lot of those, if you do it for a while, you learn how to go through them quite quickly. There were, of course, sometimes moments where you saw that clearly one of the members, not exactly junior, just someone who's just a little bit less informed what's going on with the issue, starts to, okay, you see that today this guy played the game and reported 10 things he didn't like, right? And it's quite easy to just come up to the guy and talk to him like, okay, we know about that, but it's still in design, so reporting bugs on that makes no real sense, or something like that. And of course, on the other hand, we had to limit, we had limited resources and a limited time. So as I said, triage in medicine is the process of selecting who will die.
Right.
So we were selecting which improvements, features, bugs will remain unsolved because we didn't have time to do them.
Cheers. Thank you very much for the exhausting answers.
Right. Thank you very much. So please, big round of applause for the Błażej.
Thank you.